Awesome! You've gone through sort of the basis of reprogramming, which is really, really powerful. What I want to do now is look at more at the application of it, and kind of most significantly look at how you can really overcome like super huge challenges by sort of leveraging these tools and leveraging the exercise that you just did. And if you didn't do the exercise, go do the exercise. It's gonna be awesome and you're gonna love it, and it will literally change your life, which is insane and super, super cool. So with that said, what Eckhart does here is kind of interesting. He talks about how when he was growing up, you know, his dad would always be sort of like the head of the household. And he would, you know, if Eckhart ever wanted something, or he's like, hey, you know, can I get something or something? You know, he would say, what do you think I'm made of, right? And I think this is something that at least I heard a lot when I was growing up, and most people I know heard a lot when they were growing up. It's like, you know, do you think I'm like made of money or something? And what this does is kind of harsh, is it puts this limiting mental capacity on money and income and cash flow. And it implies that money is a scarcity instead of what you need to look at it as, which is of course an abundance, right? There's an abundance of anything, and the more you think of things in terms of abundance, the more of that you will have. A really good example, like I have a pretty, you know, hefty metabolism. I eat a lot of food, just because I need to. I'm always working out, and it's just really important for me. And so, like if I go to lunch, if I go to dinner or something, the first thing I will do is like get food, right? I mean, it's basic stuff. But if I get a bunch of stuff and someone's like sitting next to me and they're like, oh my gosh, like that looks so good. Or even if it's just like some random person in a dining hall or something, like I will totally share with people or give them like a fruit cup or whatever. I think it's like the coolest thing ever. I remember yesterday I gave someone like a parfait or something because I had like 3 of them because they eat a lot of food. And they're like, oh my god, that looks so great. I'm like, I know it looks great. It's for cheat day. You should have one. And you know, you give them one. What that does is, I mean, obviously it feels great, but the biggest thing is thinking about things in terms of an abundance, right? The more you think about, like, there's an abundance of anything, right? Food, money, resources. The more you think in terms of an abundance, the easier and easier it's gonna be to actually get those things. And if, you know, you're thinking of everything in terms of scarcity, if you're thinking of everything in terms of limitations, it's gonna inherently cause you to be less generous, and less generosity is gonna crush the amount that you give out to people, and the amount that you receive from the world around you is directly proportional to what you give to others. And it all kind of goes in the circular flow model of, you know, giving and then having that fulfillment, having that happiness, and having that impact. And in turn, maybe not necessarily from that same person, maybe not necessarily for a week or 2 or 3 or 4, but in time, like everything comes back, everything flows back, and you know, it comes full circle, right? And that's really the big concept, and the really important kind of key thing here is thinking in terms of abundance. And you know, as Eckhart talks about some of the conditions in some of his childhood, and also some of his students, you know, he's thinking about all these people that, like, a limiting idea, like their parents or their, you know, whoever they grew up with would always like there's you know, a lack of money or whatever. And for a lot of people, that's where they start if they don't really come from a really privileged background, and it totally crushes their sort of ability to earn mass amounts of wealth, because they think they're like, oh, it must be difficult to earn a bunch of money. And in reality, it's really only as tough as you make it. If you look at people that build assets, if you look at people that literally spend their whole lives going hard to build assets and then create a bunch of wealth from that, a lot of times they come from really wealthy backgrounds. Why? Because they're verbally programmed to have abundance. And so all you have to do to make a simple shift and to be just like those people is to verbally program yourself to have abundance and think in terms of how can you create assets. And that's sort of the big difference. There's this one really great example that I think kind of sums this concept up a lot more than kind of I could, like, just theoretically. And it's this idea of one of Eckhart's students who was Stephen. And the thing with Stephen is, you know, had this job, this career, and you know, there is really easy to earn a lot of money. This person, they're making, you know, $800,000 a year, and they were crushing it. You know, it was really great for them. They were doing a really awesome job, and they would take this into their household. They'd have this huge income. The difficulty was keeping it. The difficulty was not making the money, but it was spending it the right way. Remember, I was talking Carter Fart, he's thinking about this exact same concept, where for many people, the difficulty isn't making the money, especially if you start to understand sort of like 90 new investing and trading. Like, the difficulty isn't making it, the difficulty is keeping it. The difficulty is spending it the right way. And that's exactly what happened with this guy Steven, right? He was making $800,000 a year, and at the end of the day, he was scraping by. He was scraping by. Why? Scraping by because of the, like, think about it, right? Like, what are the things that could make you have tons of money, and yet at the end of the day, have particularly little money, like no money at all? Like, what could make that happen? Obviously, it's not the money, it's not the income, because you have an abundance, that's a lot of money. So if it's not the money, and it's not somebody holding you up at gunpoint saying, you know, give me all your money and I'm gonna hold your family, like if it's not that, like the only other thing that it could be is the person who's managing, right? Managing the money. Money management is the most valuable skill on this planet, and it all comes down to managing, right? If you're investing in liabilities, if you're investing in sort of depreciating and completely worthless things, like you're not gonna be able to, if you don't manage it the right way, obviously it's gonna disappear. And that's kind of what happened here. Is this guy, he grew up and his mom would always tell him that rich people are greedy. They make their money off the sweat of the poor. You should have just enough to get by and nothing more. That is enough. After that, you're a pig. That's what this guy's mom told him for years and years and years while he was growing up. And because of that, he like constantly thought inside of his subconscious that he should not have all this money and that he had to have just a little tiny amount. He had to be able to just scrape by, because that's how he thought, that's how he believed. And so hopefully with that last exercise, you've sort of been able to push away some of those negative beliefs that might have been holding you back like that. Because that's literally why this guy was broke. He was verbally conditioned to believe that rich people were greedy. And obviously, the way you think about quote-unquote rich people, because I'll tell you guys a secret, like rich people, this comes back to this concept of set point. Like what you think of as a rich person comes back to sort of what your experience is. For some people, $1 million is like way pie in the sky high, absolutely crazy. For people that live sort of maybe not in the United States, or maybe live in like the bottom, you know, percentages, like maybe 100,000 might be like really pie in the sky high, absolutely crazy. I know a lot of people that live sort of in third world countries, like for them, like, you know, $5,000, $10,000, like pie in the sky, crazy, absolutely insane, because you're living on like dollars a day, and to see that amount of wealth is insane. And yet then you have people on, you know, Wall Street, people live in New York, and for them, like super wealthy starts off when your bank account has 2 commas in it, and not 2 commas, 3 commas or 4 commas, right? When you become a billionaire, like for them, that might be their idea of super wealthy. And so the shift, it comes sort of from what you perceive it to be based on your set point. You know, for me, like super wealthy starts off once you have like 3 commas in your bank account. Once you have you know, 4 commas in your bank account, like that's sort of the game-changing place. That comes, why? It comes from the subconscious. It comes from your programming. And what's cool is, like, I didn't grow up around billionaires. I didn't grow up around 100 millionaires. But what I've been able to do is not only surround myself with those people, which is one of the best things you can do if you have that ability, but most significantly is mentally program yourself to be in that state. Mentally program yourself to say, look, you know, if you have access to those kinds of level of wealth, you know, surround yourself with those individuals, and they will rub off on you. It is without a doubt one of the best things that's ever happened in my life. But if you don't, first of all, always look for that opportunity. But second of all, just surround yourself mentally with some of the top mentors, some of the top, you know, wealthy people that you know of that are where you want to be. And even if they're not maybe where you want to be, like maybe, you know, you're like, oh, maybe I'm not going to be a 100 billionaire. But like, think of like, what would happen if you thought like Jeff Bezos? What would happen if you thought like 100 billionaires? And what would happen if you just sort of mentally played the game as if you were them, as if you were constantly being taught by them? Even if it's just in your mind, you can make it a reality by sort of internally believing in it, right? Internally saying, you know, what would I do if I was this person? And if you do that over and over and over again for years and years and years and decades and decades and decades, you know, you can become any person that you want. You can have any level of achievement that you want by just following a model and constantly anchoring yourself where, you know, you might be down here, right? You might be at, you know, just a little bit of money. And you could be constantly anchoring yourself with somebody who's like way up here. The important to understand is there are 4 key elements to change. 4 really critical, essential factors in reprogramming your financial blueprint. So let's go through those real quick. And I think once you master these and you understand these, it's really a pretty huge game changer. So the first one is awareness, right? This is what we're talking about. This idea that you need to understand what's going on. You can't understand or change something unless you know that it exists. And the second element is sort of the more critical point, at least, I think, is understanding. You really want to know where something comes from if you want to change it. If you're looking at the end result, if you're looking at that tree and you're like, why is this tree growing apples? I thought it was going to grow oranges. Like, you want to look at what's actually causing that to happen. And usually, well, I guess trees don't grow oranges, but it comes from the seeds you plant, right? It comes from the roots. It comes from the base. It kind of understands sort of the way of thinking where it originates, right? Like, that's the really important thing with understanding, is you're looking at where something originates from. And once you know that, you can start to shift it, right? You start to change it. And you can make a change because it comes from outside of you, not something that's inside of you. If you have this thought that you're not happy with, if you have this mindset that's sort of holding you back, you want to think of where it comes from and then realize that, because it's tough to say that, like, I'm going to change myself or I'm going to change. I remember when I first long time ago, we started to get into like actually changing my body to be healthy and to have really great physical fitness. I was thinking about, like, well, why am I in this state? Why am I where I am? And I'm thinking about, like, growing up with my parents, and they had the restaurant, right? And I would just always go there and just have, like, really unhealthy food, like cheeseburgers, fries, Coke, and all that crap. And it was great, growing up as this kid who was having a baller time every time, because we would literally eat out, like, every day, because we own the restaurant. But that led to a lot of really bad habits that I had to realize that, look, I myself internally am not naturally just going to be this really heavy consumption, high calorie guy. It's coming from my surroundings. It's coming from my environment. It's coming from this outside force. And once you understand where that outside factor is, then you can start to make the shift. Then you can start to make the change, because now you understand where it's actually coming from. You can identify it, you can change it. And that's the big shift. You can identify it, you can change it. Then the third step, and sort of the third element, is disassociation, right? So now that you have something that's outside of you, because like I said, it's really difficult to disassociate something if you believe it's part of you. It's a much more difficult problem. But now that you have sort of something that's outside of you, you want to disassociate yourself from that. You want to put up a wall and realize that way of thinking isn't you, and you can separate yourself from it and choose in the present whether to keep it or let it go. And based on who you are today and where you want to be tomorrow, you can kind of observe this way of thinking and see it for what it is. It is a file of information that was stored in your mind a long time ago and may not hold any truth or value for you anymore. And that simple shift, that simple demeanor, it comes from what? It comes from being able to understand that you can separate yourself from that. And usually what I found is, as I've gone through this process many times to change a lot of my habits, and it takes about a month from what I've found to really establish and really shift a habit. I've gone through this process over and over, especially like with my investing and my mentality and my psychology behind finances and trading. Very often you have to sort of overcome something. You have to sort of shift your state, shift your beliefs. And that change comes from you being able to say, look, I'm going to visually see like this thing that is outside of me, and I'm going to make the conscious decision. And here's the important part. You're going to make the conscious decision to ignore it. And usually this comes sort of when you're ignoring something that's negative, when you're ignoring something that's bad. Because if you put like any attention on anything, it will grow. It doesn't matter if it's negative attention, if you're saying like, oh, that's a bad thing. Like if I keep saying every single day that, crack heroin and taking tons of drugs is a bad thing, and I constantly surround myself with that kind of environment, and I put my attention and my focus on stuff like that, like, give it time and it will become, I'll be like a druggie, right? Why? Because it doesn't matter if it's good attention or if it's bad attention. If you look at, Trump, how did he get elected, right? A lot of it came from quote unquote bad attention, but attention is attention. It doesn't matter if it's good, doesn't matter if it's bad. If you look at companies, like literally any company, an example that comes to mind is Ford. An example that comes to mind are the car manufacturers, when Unsafe at Any Speed came out and everyone was like freaking out about cars. Like, even though that was awful news, and even though that was really, really, really a crushing article or a crushing book that led to, you know, a lot of people saying cars are super dangerous, what did it do? Bad PR is good PR. Bad emotion, bad attention, bad focus is good focus. And it led to what? It led to more sales. Doesn't matter, like, there is no association between positive attention and negative attention and the actual outcome. In either situation, you're going to have more of whatever you focus on. Doesn't matter what kind of association you have in your mind. And this is shown obviously in financial markets. Like, you look at everybody, I remember there's so many examples in history and Bitcoin has just exploded. And it doesn't matter if it's good news or bad news about the currency or the whole network, this idea of blockchain tech. Like, the only thing that matters is attention. And so what's really critical is you make this disassociation in your mind of yourself and these emotions that you don't want to have anymore. You need to cut them off from who you are. And you need to sort of, if you think about it in terms of like, you have, let's say, you know, you're getting surgery. And I know a lot of people that are amputees, and it's really it's really tough. And this one guy, he has like a leg, and he has like a femur, but in his knee, his leg just stops, and after that, it's like this little curved, kind of bendy stick thing. You might have seen something like this before. You might not have seen something like this before. But basically, like, he lost like the lower half of his leg, and as they're doing this surgery. To sort of remove his leg, which is like, it's so harsh. What do you do, right? You cut off the blood from the leg. You constrain the nerves so that the energy of your body, which is blood, which is kind of gross, but the energy doesn't reach the portion of that leg that you want to sort of remove. And it's the same thing with your mind. Like, if you want to remove a chunk that's not really serving you, like for this guy, like the bottom of his leg was just wrangled and disgusting, but it was like totally unusable, right? The same thing with these negative ideas that are holding you back. They're totally unusable. And what you want to do is you want to think about that metaphor of like constraining the leg to get rid of that little portion on the bottom. It's the same thing with your mind. You want to mentally sort of cut off the blood flow to those negative thoughts, cut off the blood flow to those negative outside things that you've dissociated and you understand that they exist. If you cut off the attention that you give to them, they will slowly fade away. They'll start to disappear because they aren't being fed what they need to survive. For the body, you know, any part of the body needs blood to survive. For your mind, ideas need attention to survive. And sometimes that attention can come sort of unintentionally, you know, if you accidentally remember something, versus forgetting something else. It's kind of interesting looking at memory. Like, a lot of people, at least scientifically, they've kind of proven that you remember bad experiences a lot better than good experiences, which I think is kind of weird. It takes, according to statistics, 10 good experiences to balance out one bad experience. And so if you can just cut off the energy of one bad experience using sort of the exercise that we used in the last module. You use that to get rid of one bad experience by cutting off the attention to it and thereby over time killing it. Then you will create in turn 10 times more great experiences and 10 times better recognition of happiness in your mind. Like I said, I kind of first went through that experience about a year or so ago, and I don't remember the things that I did, like I don't remember the things that I sort of projected out of my mind. I kind of remember what they were about, but I don't remember the actual experiences themselves anymore because I literally threw them off and cut off all attention to them, and now they are not a part of who I am. And that's again kind of the big power of that exercise we just did, is what you're really doing when you scream that thought out of your mind and out of your body is you're replacing it with this positive experience of you being in control, you being in power. Now when I think of sort of those negative experiences that I can't remember anymore, like I don't know what they are, all I can think about is me doing that exercise and screaming it away, screaming it away, screaming it away. And it's better to put your attention and positive focus on something that's neutral or positive or slightly positive than something that's, you know, 1,000 times more negative, because that's bad stuff right there, right? And so again, all your attention, all your focus, you want to put it towards that positivity. And then this fourth step here is kind of the final step, And the final element is reconditioning. And this is what happens sort of over time, right? Reconditioning. Reconditioning. And we begin this, we'll kind of look, Eckert talks about a lot more in part 2 of the book, where we're going to learn about kind of how you can generate your own mental files and create tons and tons of wealth and, have a lot of success by filling your mind with ideas of abundance, ideas of money, ideas of success. And that kind of comes, a lot of it will come through experience. For me, most of that came through just making really phenomenal investments and then having those, sort of be the inspiration for me to do more and be more and to have more. And hopefully I'll be able to share that with you, especially now that you have 9 to noon. You'll be able to make, you're really, really close. I mean, if not already there, making some absolutely out of this world ballpark investments, just home run. It's cool stuff. And so that's kind of the really, really powerful mindset, the really powerful shift that comes here, especially with verbal programming, is you sort of want to write down all the statements that you heard about money, about wealth, about rich people when you were young. This goes back to this process we were just talking about, this process we were going through last module. You want to go through this process of understanding what you've been through, understanding the beliefs that you've heard from others, and you want to understand why you believe these statements and how these statements have affected your financial life so far. And this is why it's really critical that you guys actually get a copy of this book, because this is a pretty in-depth exercise where you're actually writing stuff down, so you want to be able to follow the step-by-step process in here. But basically what you need to do is really basic. Write down all the statements you heard about money, wealth, and rich people when you were young. Write down how you believe these statements have affected your financial life so far. And then for the disassociation element, you want to sort of look and see, can you see these thoughts represent only what you learned and are not part of your anatomy and not who you are? Can you see that you have a choice in the present moment to be different, to be more, to do more? Can you see that these thoughts represent not you, but something outside of you? And you want to kind of write this down. Kind of have like a first column for what the belief is, first column for their awareness, a second column for understanding, a second column for figuring out how it's had an effect on you, a third column for dissociation. Write down how you can dissociate it. And then this fourth one is the most important thing. Put your hand over your heart and you say, what I heard about money isn't necessarily true. I choose to adopt new ways of thinking that support my happiness and success. And then you want to touch your head and say, I have a millionaire mind. You want to do that for every single element, just like we were doing in the last module. You do that for every single limiting belief. And it's a game changer. It'll change everything for you. That's sort of the core, and that's the foundation behind overcoming this idea of mental limitations, verbal limitations, where people come from. It all comes down to this one core concept, this one simple 4-step process that you can kind of use to really, really, really be able to focus on abundance, focus on that growth mindset, focus on what is out there, because there's so much more that's out there, no matter where you're starting from, and it's all sort of at your fingertips once you understand the core concepts, once you understand how to really master your mind, which is super, super exciting. And that's kind of I just think verbal programming is probably one of the most interesting parts here, and the one that really made a really huge chunk of the shift that came from going through this was understanding this and going through these exercises. So really, really critical, really important that you go through this exercise, right? You have your columns, and you sort of have, awareness in one, understanding in another, disassociation in another, and then you go through the process of actually verbally saying this reconditioning, verbally going through, hand on your heart. You understand what you've done is wrong. You think about like the positive equivalent of what you said, and thinking about, if it's something negative like, money's the root of all evil, you want to write that down, understand where it came from, disassociate that thought from you, and then say, I understand that money is good and empowering and a multiple of only who you are. I have a millionaire mind. You want to go through that process? For me, like this list was about 20 things when I first started. For you, it might be 50. For some of you guys, it might be 10. Depends on what you grew up with. But you want to go through this process, go through this list right now, and every single one you want to make that declaration and audibly, literally scream as loud as you can that you have a millionaire mind, and you will have the success, and you'll have that growth, because right now, you're going to overcome these limiting verbal conditionings that you probably have grown up with. So with that said, thank you so much. I hope you get a ton of value out of this module. Apply it right now. Absolutely crush it. And I will see you in the next module. Thank you. Bye.